Hello, 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 friend, and welcome to this episode of the SpeechGoods podcast. And you know how we are just all about keeping it real here. And I love delving into topics, whether it's just a solo episode with me or it's an episode with another amazing professional person, human being, whoever you are, delving into topics that are things that are actually relevant to us in everyday life as SLPs, the stuff that you actually want to know, right? This is a no fluff zone. Well, for today's episode, I have the wonderful, the amazing Lauren DeVoe. And to start off, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Lauren, and then I'm going to tell you about what this episode is actually going to be chatting about. So first of all, Lauren has been an SLP for 4 years. She's worked in birth to 3 since graduating and also in the hospital setting doing acute care PRN. And in November of 2021, Lauren launched her own private practice. You know your girl loves private practice. And the name of her practice is called Talking Bear Speech Therapy, and she is located in Milwaukee. She recently quit her birth to 3 job to pursue private practice full time. She specializes in working with late talking toddlers and children with speech sound disorders. Lauren enjoys working with families to help their child become a more effective communicator. And actually, whenever I was posting to my stories and kind of asking, what do you guys want to hear? Or, hey, does anyone out there want to be interviewed if you feel you have something of value to share? Lauren actually reached out to me because she really wanted to talk about her experience within the first few months into her private practice. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's genius. You know, a lot of times we may hear conversations on podcast or Instagram lives or wherever you consume your media content about, you know, when we want to start a private practice and questions about how to start. And then you may hear from individuals when they're kind of like on the other end of private practice. Maybe they've had their private practice for quite a while and sharing their experience, or maybe they're growing their private practice. But I really liked this idea of talking to someone who's like literally in the trenches, like within the first few months of starting a private practice. Like we're still building a caseload, we're still marketing, we're still getting clients. And so I just was really, really excited to get to talk to Lauren. And you know, like I said, we keep it very low fluff up in this place. So we talk about how she transitioned from her full-time job with birth to 3 into private practice. We talk about like what made her realize she could actually go do the dang thing. We talked about what made her finally take the plunge. And especially, I think it's important for all of us, and for those of you out there who may be considering private practice or any kind of business, to hear someone, you know, in the trenches, not necessarily on the other end of like, oh, you know, I took the plunge and now I've built the practice of my dreams. Well, that's great, and I love that, but it doesn't always feel that way whenever you're in those actual trenches, whenever you're in those first few months. And so it was just a really great conversation with Lauren, and I really appreciated having her on the show. Okay, so let's not delay this any longer. Let's get to our interview with Lauren. Hello, 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 Lauren. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes. So we just heard your awesome bio. And if anyone out there if you haven't looked at the episode title, hopefully it'll give you a little bit of a hint. But we have a really specific topic that we're going to address today. So Lauren, you are kind of actually in the beginning stages of your private practice, right? Like how many months are you in to starting your private practice?
I just hit 6 months on May 19th.
Woohoo! That's so exciting.
Yes.
That's so exciting.
Yes.
So I thought it would be super interesting. It actually, all this came about where I posted a story about people like, what do you guys want to hear on the podcast? And Lauren, you actually replied and basically said like, hey, I'm in the beginning stages, but I feel like there's mistakes that I've made or things that I wish I would have known. And I thought it would be really cool to have Lauren on to talk about sort of those early feelings and those early like little twinges you get in your stomach when you first start your business or your private practice. I feel like sometimes we can often, you know, we may hear from people 1 or 2 years after they started their private practice, which is all amazing and great information. But I thought it would just be really cool and unique to hear from someone like you, Lauren, who you're still really just starting and you're kind of like really in the thick of it. Like you're still trying to get referrals and getting clients and things like that. So can you start out by telling us a little bit about where you are in your private practice?
Yeah, so right now I actually just quit my job. So I was working full time in birth to three, and then I was doing my private practice on the side. So I did like 4 10-hour days with birth to three, and then I was seeing private clients Mondays and the weekends. But I just quit last week. So that was my last day. And now I'm transitioning to doing my private practice full time. So that's kind of where I'm at now. But when I started looking back into back in the fall, when I started looking into doing a private practice, I had no idea what I was doing. This was something that I never really saw myself ever doing. I was never one of those people that like dreamed of having a private practice, because I just always thought it was like unattainable for me. It just always seemed like this thing that I don't know, just kind of seemed very complicated, like legally and insurance and all of those things. Because I just never really knew because we didn't really learn about it much in grad school. So when I decided that I wanted to do it, I like obsessively researched, and I joined Jenna, the independent clinician. I joined her Facebook group, kind of like scoured through the Facebook to try to get myself educated on what I needed to do. And then I started in November, actually on my birthday, because I was like, why not? That makes it a little bit fun. So then I started back in November.
That's so exciting. So did you take like a course, or like did you get any guides or anything, or did you kind of just really put pieces together through information on Facebook groups and things like that?
I definitely just pieced it all together, which made things a little complicated. I wanted to like take some courses, but like just at that time financially, I just was like, oh, I don't know that I can swing that right now. So I was like, you know what, I'll just try to kind of like put all these pieces together. So, I mean, I like scoured that Facebook group and like I listened to so many of her podcast episodes and like made myself a bunch of checklists to try to, again, piece together like what I needed to do to get started.
So how long, because this is something that I know many SLPs, like they'll think about private practice for like 7 years or something and but never actually do it. How long were you in that sort of like prep stage? Like you were like, okay, I think this is something I want to do. I'm going to gather information. I'm going to listen to podcasts and see the Facebook groups. How long were you kind of in that stage before you took action on it?
Honestly, which is very uncharacteristic for me, it was maybe like a month and a half. Like I,
Oh.
yeah, which again, at first I was like, am I just being like really impulsive? Like this is kind of not like me, but I don't know. It was like once I started looking into it, I don't know. It just like, it sounds so cheesy, but something about it just felt like this is like the right decision. And like I went for it. So I was in that prep phase very not long at all because I just like it's like once I had my mind on it, I just like ran with it. And then yeah, like I said, it was maybe a month and a half from like start to finish of when I like actually launched the practice.
Yeah, that is like a very rare and fine thing to hear from an SLP. Like I will hear from people and I'll like, I still look around the Facebook groups and stuff to be like, hey, what's everybody talking about?
Hmm.
And that's what I'll see like, oh, like I've been thinking about this for like 3 years. Or
Hmm.
I remember one post I saw, I've been thinking about this for like 10 or 15 years. So that is really awesome that you felt you were able to just make that decision and go for it. So what made you decide that you wanted to even start a private practice? Because you were working birth to three. And was that like independent contract work, or how does that work?
So I was working like through an agency that was contracted through the county. And honestly, like what really like got the wheels turning is I started seeing like so many speech therapists on Instagram making these like courses and starting their own private practices. And like pre-COVID, I didn't really follow speech therapists on Instagram, like on my personal account. And then kind of I started following more people and I saw all the things they were doing. And I was like, this is so cool. Like I didn't even know that speech therapists were out here doing this kind of stuff. So I just kind of started thinking like, I wonder if I could do something like that. And again, private practice was like never on my radar because I just always assumed like, I don't know, that I would just never be able to do it. And then when I started seeing all these other therapists that were doing it, I was like, think I could do it. So then I just kind of like, again, I don't know, it was weird because it was so impulsive and I'm not an impulsive person, but all of a sudden I was just like, well, I think I'm gonna just give it a try. And yeah, that's kind of how it got started.
So what made you, because like you're similar to me in that some people like they go into grad school knowing they want to start their own business.
Yeah.
Like that's like that's kind of in their mind, which is awesome. Kudos to those people. They're fabulous. But I was not that way either. Like I kind of happened, like private practice almost became like a little bit, it almost became a necessity. Like if I wanted to do what I wanted to do, if I wanted to have flexibility, if I wanted to create the income I wanted, like private practice in my area was really kind of my only option. So what made you realize that, oh, like I could do this, especially since it wasn't an expectation that you ever had for yourself before?
I think it was like all the research that I did. Like once I joined that Facebook group, and especially when I started listening to Jenna's podcast, what I liked about it was like you just hear story after story after story of all of these people that did it. They're from all over the country, all different stages in their careers. And that's, I felt like what really made me realize like, oh, I could do this because look at all these other people that have done it. And it was a lot, not easier, but I guess easier than I thought it would be because I guess I always assumed that it was like this huge legal nightmare. And then when I like saw what you actually needed to start, I was like, oh, that's way less complicated than I ever thought it would be. So that's kind of what made me like to, finally decide to give it a try.
Yeah, I think sometimes we can glorify things a little much, or I don't even know if glorify is the right word, but it's like putting things on this pedestal and making it like seem so impossible for us to reach it. And like I think private practice is awesome, but I think if you I don't know, like what would the word be with like not glamorize or glorize, but almost kind of like if you make it if you just make it this big and scary thing, it makes it that much harder for you to actually like do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know where I got that idea, like, because I just don't even ever really remember talking about it in grad school. But I feel like if we ever did talk about it in grad school, it was kind of like this, it was portrayed to me as like illegal insurance, HIPAA, blah, 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 like just some like huge nightmare that I was just like, oh God, I'll never do that. So that's why like when I actually like looked into it, I was like, oh, like this is actually attainable.
And it's not as, I feel like, and I want everyone listening to hear this too. I feel like it's not as intimidating as some people make it out to be. And I have seen, I've seen it in markets that are very saturated and very competitive among speech therapists. I think sometimes you may even see some private practice owners like talking about, I mean, sometimes we just like to complain sometimes, first of all, like, hey, it's a thing, whatever. But I think sometimes it can almost be like an intimidation tactic to prevent other people from opening businesses, is if I just make it seem really, really scary, nobody else is going to open. I've definitely seen that in other areas where it's like, if I just make it really scary, and like, oh yeah, no, like I know how to do this, but you don't want to venture towards that way, so that people, so you won't have people opening up private practices and competing with your business. I think that's kind of like, that sort of, and Jenna talked about that a lot too, like that scarcity mindset.
Yes.
And nothing good ever comes from that.
Right, exactly.
No.
And like there's so many, at least in my area, like, there's a children's hospital near me and outpatient clinics, but like the wait lists are so long that like when I first started looking into it, I like looked at all the private practices like in my area and I was like, wow, there's quite a few. Like, oh gosh, like, is this going to be really competitive? And I realized that it isn't. Like again, like that scarcity mindset, because I was like, there's so many parents that are on 6-month wait lists for speech therapy that are like, desperate for services. The first few moms that had reached out to me were like, I've been waiting for somebody like you. Like we need like the therapy because the wait lists are crazy. So yeah, just interesting, to see what other people are thinking. I just stumbled over my words, but You get what I'm saying.
But isn't that like the biggest aha moment? Like, I feel like everyone, when they open their private practice, has that moment where like a parent tells you, like, oh my gosh, like you are exactly the person I've been looking for. It just like it's like a halo appears over your head and the clouds open up in the sky.
Yes. Yes, exactly. I was like, oh, it made me feel so good. I was like, yes, this is like the right decision.
Yes. So you started your practice on the side. And so you did 1 day a week and weekends for seeing private clients. Were you already working 4 days a week at your full-time job, or did you negotiate that? Or did you negotiate down to 4 days so you could do your private practice one day?
Yeah, so when I had started at Birth to Three, I started doing the 4 10-hour days because prior I was actually working PRN at an acute care hospital. So that's what I was doing like on Mondays. So luckily when I had started the job, I was already doing the 4 10-hour days with Birth to Three.
Okay, gotcha. And so you started on the side knowing that you had that Monday, and then obviously that you could do weekends. How did you transition? I know I get that question a lot of transitioning from a full-time stable, I'm gonna put quotes on that, because if any of you have listened to me, nothing's truly 100% stable, but a relatively stable income and stable clients. How did you transition from that, like financially and even just emotionally, to like, because now you're full-time in your private practice, right?
hmm hmm
Do you have a full-time caseload yet? Or are you still building up your caseload?
So still building up my caseload. So my plan was always like, I was full-time at Birth to Three, seeing private clients on the side. And then I kind of wanted to do part-time at Birth to Three and build up, my private clients, and then eventually quit Birth to Three, do my practice full-time. So, and I was getting to that point where I was just like, okay, I can't keep doing both. Like I was starting to feel pretty burnt out. It was just a lot. And so a few months ago, I had asked my boss if I could go down to part-time. They said no,
Oh,
which, yeah, I mean, I wasn't shocked. I mean, the Birth to Three, at least around here, like it's been crazy, like the speech referrals. So they needed a full-time person. So I understood that. But at that point, I was kind of like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to figure something else out because I can't keep going like this. Um, so at that point, I was like, okay, financially, like I knew I wouldn't be able to just quit my job because my private practice was not at the point where it's like paying all of my bills. So I'm very fortunate and lucky, and I was able to talk to my parents, and my parents, they said that they'd be willing to give me a loan to kind of help me through this transition phase. Um, oh, sorry, goodness. So I was very lucky for that. Um, because again, I don't know financially if I would have been able to swing it otherwise. Um, but emotionally, it was definitely really tough because again, I did not anticipate quitting this soon. And I was just really bummed that it like just didn't really work out exactly, how I had planned. And you know, I really didn't want to have to rely on my parents to help out financially. That just kind of, a shot to the ego, I guess, kind of thing. But, they offered, and I was like, well, it's a loan, I can pay them back. Um, but it was terrifying. I mean, I've been like just terrified for like a month straight, like ever since I decided I was going to put in my notice. Um, it's so scary to go from like, okay, I'm getting, a steady paycheck every other week or whatever, to now I'm like, okay, my private practice is growing, but it's not at the point where, I'll be able to pay all my bills and save money and all of that. So it's definitely been a very scary, scary transition.
yeah. And you just quit. Was your last day at your full-time job last week?
Yeah, literally Friday was my
Okay.
last day.
Just like to give everyone like a frame of reference for where she is in this transition.
Yes.
And Lauren, if you don't mind me asking, are you married, or is it just you financially?
So I live with my boyfriend, but we're not married. We don't like our finances are all separate and everything.
Okay.
Um, and of course he's like offered to help out, but I don't know. My own pride is kind of like, I don't need a man's help. I can do this myself. Even though I like, my parents are helping, but I didn't I just didn't feel comfortable like relying on him for that. I was like, I wanted to do this, kind of more myself, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I only ask that because I think there's this misconception that like, if you are not married, then, like you can't do it because, I need, I need his benefits, or, well, okay, at least if we can rely on his income, or her income, I'll use gender neutral pronouns, on their income, and while I build this up or whatever, which, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like it's definitely an advantage. I mean, I will say that, like, I had that, like my husband, we kind of switched roles. Like when we first got married, he was the one that was trying to figure out kind of what he wanted to do. And I had the stable, predictable income. And then we kind of switched when I started my private practice. But I think that's really, can you just tell us a little bit about your perspective with starting this as someone, I mean, you don't have a spouse whose income you are also getting in, like you're not on someone else's insurance plan and things like that. And I think those are things that hold people back a lot. Like I have a friend who wants to do contract work, but she's basically just like, I'm waiting till I get married because she just can't, for her, and it's an individual decision, of course, but for her, like the idea of not having that like steady paycheck every 2 weeks with the benefits, she's like, I just can't do it. I just can't take that. So can you tell us about your perspective of taking this plunge, especially now in the beginning, as well, you got a boyfriend, but legally a single Pringle.
Right. Yes. And I should say, caveat to that, which I kind of forgot about this part. I didn't even know that this was possible, but I actually did get on his health insurance because I didn't even know that this existed until like literally 2 months ago when my friend told me you can file a domestic partnership because we share an address and we have like the same address on our driver's license. Yeah, I didn't even know that that was a thing.
Is that a state specific thing, you think?
Maybe.
No?
It might be. And it's like employer dependent.
Okay.
Yeah. But I had no idea that that was even a thing. So I should say that also very much helped with my decision, because the other stuff I was kind of like, whatever, I'll figure that out. But the health insurance, especially because like I've had a lot of medical things. So insurance to me was like just really scary to like think about not having insurance or like finding my own insurance. So that is one caveat, is I definitely, as soon as I found out that we could do that, I was like, I'm getting on your health insurance. So that for sure helped. And also, again, I'm extremely fortunate that I luckily kind of have that safety net of my parents that like, if I do get into a bind, they would be able to help me out. So that I'm very lucky in that respect. But I think also I'm trying to just have and I'm like currently still struggling with this because this is so new, but I'm kind of just like relying on that blind faith within myself that like, I'm going to figure it out. I'll figure it out. And like, it might take a while till I'm making what I was making at birth to 3, but like, I just kind of believe that I'll get there. Of course, then I have like my imposter syndrome, and then I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna be poor. But I try to just like push that to the side and just like, again, kind of have this like blind faith that like, I'll figure it out.
But I think you're gonna have to know yourself too. Like, I know for some people, they do have to kind of take more of like your approach, where it's just like, I don't like, I'm not even going to think about the possibility that this isn't going to work out. Like, that's how they're able, that's kind of how they're able to wrap their mind around it. Whereas like, I am the opposite, Lauren. Like, I think of, okay, what is the worst case scenario and what am I going to do about it? Like,
yeah.
And it's okay. Like, it's okay, it's okay, whichever one that you are, but just don't feel pressured to be like one or be like the other.
Right.
Like for me, I always knew, I was like, if this completely and utterly fails, I know the schools in my parish are always looking for speech therapists. I was like, it's not like what I would want to do. But like, I'm not going to starve.
Yes.
Like we're going to be able to pay our mortgage. Like, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. So kind of figuring out like whatever, I feel like whatever mental gymnastics or exercises you have to do in your mind to kind of help you like finally take the plunge. So what got you to finally take the plunge? Like I know you wanted to do it, but what got you to finally like officially dive in?
To like private practice in general or full
Yeah.
time?
Um, let's do both. Let's say both.
Okay.
That's all good. That's all good
Um,
questions.
yeah, so I guess initially what kind of got me to do it, oh gosh, honestly, I don't even really know. It was just like once I like had my checklist, and again, it was quote easier than I thought it was going to be. I was like, I can do this, and if it fails, then I just like, okay, what I spent whatever, however much it is to get an LLC and liability insurance, a couple $100. Like, oh, so oh well. And I think because I already had a full-time job, it just felt really low risk. And so it was like, okay, once I had everything kind of lined up, I was like, I'm just going to do it and I'm just going to see what happens.
Yep.
Um,
Just go
and
for it.
exactly, like I just kind of did it. And again, I think seeing in that Facebook group, seeing how many people, which there's nothing wrong with this, but seeing how many people were like, oh, I've been thinking about this for 5 years. I've been thinking about this. I was like, I'm not going to just sit here and think about it. Like, I'm just going to do it and we're just going to see what happens. And I don't know, that was just kind of my mentality going into it. And I was kind of like, if I am going to do this, I feel like now's the time. Because again, I knew that like there's wait lists everywhere right now. People need speech therapy for their kids. So I was just like, I'm just going to see what happens. So that's kind of what got me to, take that plunge initially. And then I think, going into doing this full time, again, because my work was not really working with me about reducing my hours. And I was feeling really burnt out, like really burnt out of work. A lot of like policies were changing at my birth to three agency with productivity. And like, I mean, that's a whole other podcast episode because that was just a nightmare, the whole productivity conversation, which, anybody that works pretty much in the therapy world knows those struggles. But so that was also a factor. And I don't know, I just like talked it over with my boyfriend and my family. And my mom was like, Lauren, you don't have kids yet. Like, if you are going to do this, now might be the time to just go all in and like give it your all and just kind of see what happens.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. So, can you tell us a little bit about like some of the mistakes that you made with starting your private practice?
Yeah, so I'd say at, there's been a lot. I think because I like did all of this rather quickly, there was some things that I kind of was like, took a few missteps on, like, I mean, just silly things like accidentally having parents send me like reports over email that I was like, and then I would like post in that Facebook group to be like, wait, this is HIPAA compliant, right? And people would be like, no, that's not HIPAA compliant. And I'd be like, oh my God, and like freak out. So like little things like that. And then also I found that setting prices was really hard. Like that probably was the hardest thing when I got started is figuring out prices. And then with that, then telling families your prices. I would like, oh my gosh, would I beat around the bush and I would stumble over my words because they would ask me. And I kept kind of wavering too on my prices because I live in the city and a lot of the private clients I have are more like kind of out in the suburbs. So I was like, okay, how do I account for my travel? So I really wavered on my prices. And honestly, it was really funny. The very first mom that reached out to me, and this was only a couple days after I like launched my practice. So I figured it would take a long time for anybody to even reach out, but she reached out right away. So I hadn't even really like fully rehearse my speech yet. And, I told her I was like, well, I'll have to look at my travel and this and that. And like, I said a number and she raised it, which like, I know that does not really happen.
What?
Yeah, I know, which like that does not happen, but she owns her own business and she was so sweet. She was like, you need to understand your worth and like, like, yeah, like hyping
I
me
love
up.
her.
I know, like totally hypes me up, which like made me feel so much better. And then I was like, okay, she's right. Like, I need to be more confident with this. But that was like, again, I kept kind of going back and forth and wavering. And then I'd be like, okay, well, if they're this far away, I should charge this. And my boyfriend's like, Lauren, you're making this way too complicated. He's like, set your prices and stick to them. And that was just like really hard. So that was definitely a mistake I made in the beginning. I just kept going back and forth. Um, so that was one mistake that I had made. And then I think, which I'm probably arguably still doing, is like I'm doing a lot of driving right now. Like again, when I'm in the city, but a lot of my clients are out in the suburbs. So I'm definitely doing a lot of driving. But I think for right now, that's probably just kind of what I have to do to get things going. So that, and then also in the beginning too, I found myself really comparing like myself to other speech therapists, like especially on Instagram, that had like these huge followings and like their private practices were totally thriving. And they just seemed, which I mean, that's social media, right? Like people like seem to always have it all together, even though they probably don't. And social media is that highlight reel. But I definitely felt myself really comparing, myself and where I was at to others.
Yes, that is a very easy trap to get caught in, especially because when you're in that research stage, you are probably on Facebook and social media because you're gathering information and inspiration. Mm-hmm. It's almost like those very same things that were inspiring you also can get you caught in that comparison game.
Yes. And I just felt very late to the game because, like I said, I didn't really follow speech therapist on Instagram pre-COVID. And then once I did, I kind of got myself into the SLP Instagram world. I just felt very behind because I was like, oh my gosh, these people, started their pages 6-7 years ago. And here I am just starting now. So yeah, that was kind of a challenge too.
Got you. And I just, for some encouragement out there, it is never too late. Never, never too late. There's always, I don't remember who told me that. I don't remember who told me this, but it's basically something like no one is you.
Right.
So like whether it's your therapy or your Instagram or, you're making, I don't know, you're making koozies on Etsy, whatever.
Right.
Nobody has your specific special sauce.
Right.
But it is really hard not to compare. It is because there's so much, there's so much out there to compare yourself to. Mm-hmm. And then it's also, we're never seeing anybody's daily grind.
Right.
Like we're only, just like you said, like we're really only seeing like the highlight reel.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that I was like very intentional about when I started my Instagram. Because it's not like my personal Instagram, right? It's like my Talking Bear speech therapy Instagram. But it's like, even though it's like marketed as my practice, I still wanted it to be me because it's me that runs this private practice. And like I love how you always like say on your Instagram that you're all about like keeping it real, and like that's how I feel too. I was like, I'm gonna try to do my best to like show my struggles, and even though it's like the practice, it's just me, so I'm going to show myself. And I remember even when I started it, I don't know, I shared something and it had a swear word in it, and my mom called me and she's like, are you sure you want to share that on your Talking Bear Instagram? I was like, yes, Mom, because like obviously not in therapy sessions, but like I curse a lot, I don't know. And so I'm like, that's just my personality. Like I also am like, I want to keep this, it's professional, but I also like, I still want to keep it real.
Well, and it's your private practice. So like
right.
You can do with it what you want. And I think that's like the really cool thing about it is, I mean, yes, like it is like a responsibility and things that you have to think about that you never really thought about before when you're working for someone else. But it's also like you get to decide, like you get to do it. Like instead of the burden of productivity standards, there's, the burden of like, okay, what kind of style do I want to do? And like, if you ever eventually like hired people, like what kind of culture do you want to create? Mm-hmm. So I think it's always just about sort of like intentionally picking the stuff that you want to worry about.
Right. Yeah.
Because we all gonna worry about something. Let's be honest.
Yes, exactly.
So are there any other kind of like mistakes or like oopsies that you made that you can think of, or are those kind of the main big ones?
I'm trying to think what else. I feel like there's been so many, but I think again, at first, like just figuring out like, okay, how do I do this where I'm HIPAA compliant? Which like terrified me because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared that I'm gonna do something wrong and then I'm gonna get in trouble. And then it's like, when you work for an agency, you kind of, I mean, I'll just speak for myself personally. Like, I didn't really worry about that much because I was like, well, it's not on me. It's like you have the company behind you kind of thing. And then when you go out on your own, I'm like, okay, everything is on me. Like, if something happens, it is my fault. And like, all the responsibility is on me. So I feel like I just wasn't super diligent in the beginning of like having all of those like procedures set in stone, so that then I was kind of like having to backtrack to be like, okay, wait, now how do I have a parent send me this to make sure I'm HIPAA compliant? That, and then like I said, like, telling people my prices. Like I just, I would tell one parent one price, but then I would tell another parent a different price because I just could not make up my mind to like, you know what I mean? And I feel like that was kind of a whoopsie, to just, because I needed to just be comfortable and just stick to it. I found that to be so uncomfortable. And I think too, like switching over to more of that, like quote, business mindset is and still is like a struggle for me because it's like, I'm just a speech therapist. Like, I just want to help people. And you have to shift your mindset a little bit when you're now like the business owner and like thinking in those numbers. And like my boyfriend's a CPA, so like he's all about the numbers and my brain just does not work like that. So that's definitely been a struggle.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and it's definitely, I mean, I want to help kids too. Like I want to help people and blah, blah, blah. But like, if you're not charging enough for your services, you can't sustain a good business. And then if you can't sustain a good business, then you can't help people.
Right.
Like, I think I'm really over this whole, like, just because something, just because like you have higher prices or whatever, not higher, but like, just because you're making money, you're suddenly evil. It's like, well, no, like the amount, I mean, I have one contractor that works with me and I'm bringing on one more. And a lot of that, I mean, yeah, like I have money coming in my account, but a lot of that goes out to pay bills and to pay the person that I've taken on in my company and in my business, and to be able to pay her a good rate.
Yes.
Like this isn't just about like us as owners. Like if you do ever expand, or it's about the people who you do take on if you decide to get employees, or it's about the kids that you serve. If you aren't charging enough, so in order to make a decent salary, you've got to be seeing a cajillion kids back to back. That's going to affect the quality of your service. Yes. Versus, some people, I know one of my friends in private practice a couple hours from here, she really likes having like 15 to 20 minutes in between appointments. And that allows her to like do her notes and blah, blah, blah. That's how she likes it. And she feels like she's able to do a really good service when she give services that way. But you have to charge enough to be able to do that. And I feel like that's like sometimes when you might see, I mean, otherwise you go to business and then all that, like those cutesy, like, I want to help all the children in the world. Then you won't be able to help them if you can't stay in business. So it's definitely all a balance, and it is a total mindset shift because like, yes. Like if you used to kind of be like, money is like icky. Like, I don't do this for the money.
Oh my God. That was so me honestly, when I first started, like I was kind of judgy where I was seeing like, oh, I just remember, I'll never forget. I saw like people would advertise their practices as like boutique style. And I remember when I first read that and I was like, oh, and like kind of being like judgy of that. Because again, I don't know, I just wasn't used to thinking like that. And I had to really shift my mindset to be like, okay, wait, no, like if you want to run a business and make money, like I don't know, it's just like you have to shift your thinking. Of course, we still want to help kids and do the best we can. But I've also seen now that I'm on the other side, how much freaking work goes into seeing all these private clients. And I try to make sure that like I'm very available for these parents and that our therapy is very customized to that specific child and how much time that takes. And I'm like, okay, now I feel kind of bad for being a little judgy there in the beginning.
Yes, it's definitely a different mindset and a different perspective. And I think it's important to, even if you never own a business one day, because private practice is not for everybody. It 100% is not. But I think it's important to I think it's important just for empathy, just in general. So, because if you plan on never owning a business, that means you're probably going to work for someone else's business. And understanding that, like, I've had to have that conversation with some people of, like, you know, understanding the amount of time and money it takes to run a business. Like, it does take that effort. It does take that expertise. It does take, it takes a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, as if you've never had a business of your own, I know it can be difficult to see that. But then part of me thinks, as business owners, I think it's really good for business owners to sometimes, like, be, as transparent as you feel comfortable with, like, with how everything works. I had Autumn Reed Henning on this show from Chrysalis Oral Facial.
Mm-hmm.
She does like the tongue tie course, which is amazing.
Yeah.
Go follow her. She's awesome. But she says, like, her employees know how much she makes for each session. They know how much, and they know how much, like, okay, like, this is what the rent cost for us to have this building, or the mortgage, or whatever. This is how much I make per session. This is, I'm paying for, your documentation system, all those computers you're using, like, I'm paying for all those. So I think it's a platform. I think it's a subject that I hope that we can all continue to discuss really openly, even as, like, even when you get in that dynamic of, like, employer, right. Employee, whichever.
Yeah. Yes.
So what would you say to someone who isn't really sure about starting a private practice? Like, they know they want to do it, but they just have, like, there's always a reason not to do something. Like, what would you say to someone who's kind of like, well, that sounds awesome, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think, do your research. And if it feels like this is something that you are like, yeah, I could totally do this, instead of waiting until it's, quote, perfect, just do it, and you will learn as you go. That's been, like, the number one thing for me from the get-go. I was like, because at first I was like, oh, maybe I should just wait till, like, launch until everything feels perfect. And then literally it was my birthday, and I just decided, I was like, yeah, screw it. I'm just going to go live today. And so I think that has been, like, so helpful for me to have that mentality of, like, you will just literally learn as you go, and that's okay. I think typically speech therapists, not to stereotype us, but we're typically very type A. We want things perfect. We're kind of risk adverse. And with this, like, when it comes to private practice, I think, like, just doing it and kind of, like, not fake it till you make it, but kind of fake it till you make it, and just keep learning as you go and have a really open mind, and you'll figure it out. Like, and again, not comparing yourself to others. Because I know that I've already been there. Like, I can see how that really starts to weigh you down when you're like, oh, well, look at so-and-so. She already, her private practice is already full and she's whatever. So trying not to compare yourself to others, and really just trying to, like, it sounds so cheesy, but just really, like, believing in yourself that you'll figure it out. And if it doesn't work, like, the good thing about our field is you'll find a job. You know what I mean? You will find a job, and just, like, remembering that. And so, yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, like, you're not going to combust.
Right. Yes, exactly.
And I think, like, also just accepting that you're going to be learning things along the way. Like, just accept that you're going to be making some mistakes, and that it's okay. Like, when I hired my first person, like, I did not know what I was doing. I researched, like, not saying to just go into ththings without researching and having an idea, but, like, I definitely learned a lot as I went about, like, okay, like, because it's like all those little decisions that you never thought about making before. Like, how often do I pay them? Okay, like, how am I going to pay them? How much am I going to pay? Like, all those types of things. But just like you're smart. Like we're all smart. Like you would not get a stinking master's degree because
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yes.
and I think a lot of people get so intimidated, but like a lot of the math and those types of skills that go into a business are not these unattainable skills or like skills that you need to go get an MBA for.
Right.
Like most of the math is like 5th and 6th grade math.
Right. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So is there anything you would change about the private practice journey that you've had so far? Anything like what's within your control that you would change about your journey you've had so far?
That's a good question. I don't honestly, I don't think so. And it's hard too, because like I said, right now I'm like literally just now in the transition of trying to do this full time. So I really hope that like 6 months from now, I don't look back and be like, oh my God, girl, you should not have done that. You should have done it this way or whatever. I think so far though, I honestly, I don't think I would really do it any differently. I mean, I maybe could have like felt a little bit more prepared before I started. Because like I said, I was lucky in that like I launched in November and it was like this sweet spot in time where I think a lot of families, like with the holidays coming up, were being pushed so far out to get services that once when they saw that I was launching, they kind of like tried to like reached out to me right away, which I was not expecting at all. I mean, I had 3 clients within like 2 weeks. And so, which was like, then I was like, oh my God, what did I do? What did I do? Then I like freaked out for a second because I was like, I'm not ready. So like maybe I should have been like, I would have changed that a little, maybe felt a little bit more like prepared. But again, it's like I kind of figured it out. It's like it's also just trying to not be too hard on yourself. Like at the end of the day, like it's speech therapy. Is it very important? Yes, but like no one's gonna die. Like it doesn't need to be perfect. So I'd say that, but otherwise I don't really know that I would kind of change, at least to this point, my journey with it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So how are you feeling right now? Like you're 6 months in. So like kind of like I said in the beginning, I feel like a lot of people, when they do get interviewed about private practice, it's like after they've kind of got like their caseload's full, like things are pretty stable. But like, how do you feel now that you are like in the middle of it? Like
yes.
You literally quit your full-time job like days ago.
Yes. Girl, I'm terrified. I'm straight up terrified, if I'm being real, because like, I mean, like literally my schedule this week. So I have 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. I only have 7 sessions this week. Okay. So I'm like looking at my schedule and I'm like, what am I going to do with myself? Like, what do I do? I don't know what I'm going to do. So right now I'm like very scared. But also like excited because now I feel like I'll have the time to like really start advertising more and, working on my Instagram, because like, this is a random side note, but that's something I was not expecting, how much work and time goes into like the posting of content. That was surprising to me. I was like, wow, this is a lot more work than I thought it would be. So like my Instagram's kind of taken a back burner because I was just like, I started off really strong and then I was like, holy cow, this is a lot more work than I thought. But, now I at least have the time to like, continue to try to grow and advertise and like try to get more clients. But yeah, I mean, the main emotion I'm feeling right now is terrified.
Hopefully there's some excitement mixed in there.
Yes.
Too.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Good. Mostly terrified, but still a lot of excitement too. It's just that financial piece that's just really scary. And again, I still have like a safety net of like a loan if I need it. Luckily I did try to like build up my savings a little bit prior to, taking this leap. But I mean, so I am lucky that I do have that safety net, but I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. Like I won't be getting a paycheck in a couple of weeks, which is just like, okay, so like now what do I do? So yeah, very, very scared, to be honest.
And all that free time, like it's kind of weird to look and be like, that's a lot of free time. Like we don't normally have that much free time, which for me, so when I started my practice, it was right when COVID hit. So my original plan was to like use that time to go to doctor's offices and spend money on, Get some cute pens. Front desk people loved cute pens. Get some
Yes.
cute pens, people.
I should get myself some pens.
Yes. And a lot of times they'll have sales if you buy them in bulk. So get you some cute pens,
Okay.
and make, you want the front desk people to love you. That's another thing. And just it is a weird thing though to like take that, because before, like, you were just always doing therapy. Like, that
Right.
was just what you did.
Yes.
You just did therapy. But like now you're like, okay, I have to go market and network. It's like, what the heck is that? Like, is that,
Yes.
like, I thought only like hoity-toity people did that, but now I have to do
Yes.
it.
Yes. Yes. And that's another scary thing too, right? It's like, I don't know how to market. I don't know, like, how to, I'm still working on that whole like elevator pitch of, selling myself in my private practice. So that's something else too that scares me. It's like, okay, yeah, now it's like on me to like get myself clients and stuff.
Yeah. But you're going to do great. Like, it's one of those things, like, you do figure it out, and you're going to make some mistakes along the way, and that's okay. But like, you were smart and capable enough to get this far. Like, I ain't worried about you, girl. Ain't at all.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
So tell us, before I want to be respectful. I do want to be respectful of your time, but before I let you go, can you tell us kind of what your future goals are for your private practice? Like, where would you like to be a year from now with your private practice, and where would you like to be maybe 3 or 4 years from now with your practice?
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that I feel just like comfortable with my private practice, financially speaking. So like, I just want to feel like I'm at least making what I was making, at birth to three. That's kind of like step one. Like, I just want to be able to pay my bills.
Great goal. It's a really good goal.
Let's just start there. Let's be able to pay the rent and all that kind of fun stuff first. So that's kind of like more of my short-term goal, is just feel like, okay, I made the right decision. I'm making my living, like, and just feel good with that. I do think eventually I'd like to hire somebody. I'm kind of like you, like, I don't want like the big, huge clinic, multiple therapists kind of vibe, but I would like to hire, like, I don't know, a person or two, who knows. So that's kind of like what I'm hopeful for, like, a year from now. And for me too, like, I also, with going how much I have to charge per session, like, I also don't want to have a huge caseload, because at birth to three, I had a huge caseload. And I mean, it's no secret that that affects the quality of the therapy you give, right? When you have a ginormous caseload. And so I just don't want that for myself. Like, I want to be very intentional in having a relatively small caseload where I feel like I can give that dedicated time to the child and to the family too. I mean, I think because I worked in birth to three, and in Wisconsin, they do a lot of the like coaching model. And so like building those relationships with families is like extremely important to me. And I feel like in order to do that and do it the way I want, like, I can't have, this ginormous caseload of kids. So I also want to keep that in mind too, that I don't want to feel like I'm just running ragged.
Yeah.
And then eventually too, like, I know a few therapists, like I know Amy Graham runs her therapy clinic out of her house. And I think like down the road, if I could do something like that, again, I live in the city in a small house, so that would not work. But, down the road, like, if we do have a house, that it would work, I would really like to do something like that, where I kind of run it out of like a basement or something like that. Yeah, I mean, at this point, like, I don't even really know what the long-term goal is, right? Because I think I just feel so like stuck in this stage right now, because like I said, I'm freaking terrified that it's hard to like really see 5 years out, because I'm like, I just want to be able to pay my rent.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at right now.
And that's totally normal. Like, I know that's like kind of the state I was in. Like, I knew like long term I didn't want like a big clinic or a big practice, but yeah, like you're kind of in a little bit of a survival mode at the beginning, and that's okay. Like, that's where you should be. You're just kind of like, okay, getting your name out there. Like, do I want to specialize? Do I not want to specialize? Like, there's a lot of decisions to be made up front, and then just getting yourself in a rhythm, like feeling like, okay, I'm getting somewhat consistent referrals. I have like some consistent referral sources, and people know who you are. That's when like the real fun starts too, is like when you start getting those word of mouth referrals. Like, that's pretty much all I have right now.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't spent a day on marketing in a while. but I'm only building a caseload like for myself and,
Right.
like one other person.
Right.
But that's when like, and you'll go through like seasons in your private practice too. And the cool thing is like your private practice can change with you.
Right.
It can move with you. It can adapt with you. Like if you want to if you're just like, for whatever reason, like my family member is sick, I only want to work 3 days a week. Maybe you hire someone to work the other 2 days, or maybe you move your schedule around to where you may do like 3 long days instead of 5 shorter days. But that's like when it gets really fun, is when you start when you start feeling like you have control over your life. Yes. Which is a big part of why so many people get into this anyway. I'm so excited for you, Lauren. I think you're gonna do awesome.
Thank you. And that's where like Instagram has been honestly my primary referral source right now, because what I love, because I was like, okay, with my Instagram, I want to do I want to post stuff that I enjoy seeing. So like I loved seeing people's therapy videos. So that's how like I was posting therapy videos, and then moms would repost the therapy video on their page, and then that got me a bunch of referrals, which I was not expecting, but I was like, oh, this is like a really good way to market. So that has been super helpful, just as a side note. But well, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How long do you feel like it took like you, when you kind of did your private practice full time, to get to that point where you felt like you were at least like paying your bills and felt comfortable, like from a financial standpoint?
So I started my practice the day that my last day at my full-time job was the day they closed the schools for COVID. So I guess like the beginning of my private practice is definitely a little different.
Right. Yes.
It was slower than I thought it would be. Like before COVID, it was slower than I thought it would be. But once I saw COVID was like really, really happening, it was faster than I thought it would be, because everyone was moving to teletherapy anyway.
Right. Yeah.
So it really just kind of messed with my marketing. That's really what it messed with. It's like being able to connect with referral sources. So I would say I was probably at a full-time caseload. I start working with them. But so I started in March of 2020. I was probably at a full-time caseload by September.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And
during COVID, that's impressive.
Yeah. And I did, and because everyone was doing teletherapy anyway. And then I had some word of mouth referrals, because I was doing reading. Okay. Dyslexia intervention, which like that's a specialty that there's not a ton of people in my area that do it. So yeah, that's when I would say I kind of got, but when I started my practice, I already, like when I opened my doors, I already knew I had like 4 or 5 kids that I could start out with too. So I didn't start with 0.
Gotcha.
But I definitely think COVID put a damper in being able to form, like there was one referral relationship I was able to form before COVID. And then later on, like I definitely said that put a damper in it, but I started that later. Like I think I started that more like in the winter of 2020, like when we were actually able to go back into offices and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, cool. Okay. Good to know.
Yeah. Well, okay, Lauren, is there any last thoughts that you would like to leave our listeners with before I release you from my clutches?
I don't think so. I mean, I think my only thing is, like I said, if this is something you want to do and you feel like you have like the checklist of the basic things you need, and you're just kind of like waiting for that gut feeling to take the plunge, take this as your sign and just go for it, and you'll figure it out as you go. And yeah, that's my wisdom for you.
Love it. Be Nike and just do it. I love it.
Exactly. Yes. Just do it.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Lauren, for sharing your story with us. I will have to have you back on the show in like 6 to 8 months.
Yes,
like
I'd love to.
So that everyone can kind of get updated on what you're doing. I love hearing people's stories, but I also love hearing like the epilogue. Like I want to know like, where are they now? Like, okay, I did this, like, well, what's happening now? Kind of like, I really wish they would do another set of Harry Potter movies, but whatever.
Right.
Like I really want to know like our Harry Potter books. Like I want to know what happened.
What happens next? Yes. I love it.
But thank you so much for your time. And I wish you all the luck. And I think you're going to do awesome things.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for everything you put out into our SLP Instagram community. Like, I love following you and I love all your content. So thank you. And we all appreciate you so much.
Thank you. I'm blushing if you didn't, by the way. Thank you so much, Lauren. And you have a great rest of your evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Be sure you are subscribed so you can continue to get more no fluff content from me. And I would really appreciate it if you took a small amount of time to leave a review for the podcast. It really helps to boost it in the search engines and ratings, and it allows me to continue to produce this content for you and get this message out there to other SLPs and healthcare professionals. And as always, happy wealth building and go do the dang thing.